For the month of August, I read nothing but garbage, trashy books for an event called GarbAugust. Now, GarbAugust is an annual reading challenge of sorts put on by Ollie over at the BookTube channel Criminolly. And now this entails exactly what it sounds like, just reading a bunch of trashy, sort of garbage books. That doesn't mean they're bad. I certainly enjoy a good trashy read from time to time. It's a good way to give myself a break from the likes of Benjamin Lapetou or Thomas Pynchon. Sometimes you just need to read Slaves of the Volcano God, you know? So with that, let's rewind back to the 1st of August and see where I started this sort of wacky, bizarre reading journey. Okay, good morning. It is August 1st, the first day of GarbAugust, and I've finished my first book. This is Transit to Scorpio by Alan Burt Akers. Now, it's like 6:30 in the morning. I didn't read this whole book in the AM here, but I did finish it this morning. I actually cheated and started yesterday. This is the first book in a 53-book series that finished in 2014. This book was almost impossible to follow. The sheer number of characters, proper names, noble houses, continents, tribes, it was all so hard to follow. Who was who? New characters pop up every couple of pages that have speaking roles and take on like leading roles in a scene. The main character here is Dre Prescott. He is a 18th century English seaman. He's a pilot on a ship. They shipwreck off the coast of West Africa. He's taken prisoner. And while he's prisoner, he sees a star in the sky in the Scorpio constellation, and it gets brighter and brighter, and it sort of magics him off of Earth to a alien planet. He has just tons and tons of endless adventures over the course of many, many years. He battles giant scorpions and beetles and snakes while he's on a leaf boat. He encounters this floating city straight out of Gulliver's Travels. This whole book, though, is just a complete ripoff of John Carter of Mars, including like the altered gravity, where he has an advantage where he can jump like 10 feet in the air. It's a blatant ripoff of just so many books that came before this. While he's in this floating city, he meets this beautiful woman named Delia. This book is not short on beautiful women, and they're all scantily clad, and their bodies are taut and lithe and frequently naked. Nothing untoward happens. It's not really a sexual book, except that he's surrounded by scantily clad, naked or near naked women in almost every scene. But this book is so restless that it just jumps from scene to scene to scene to scene, and it leaves everything before it behind. He's taken as a slave, and while he's a slave, he becomes like a tribal leader of all these different tribes. He manufactures this grand escape, but like all the slaves are killed except for him, and then he just like spends the rest of the book fighting his way to freedom with Delia. It is a mess. This book is a total mess, and by the end of it, I was honestly just skimming. So the first 5 books here are all part of the same kind of continuous story, and the covers are great. That's what kind of attracted me to this series, was these really cool acrylic paintings. I really love this style. Unfortunately, the book isn't any good, and I'm not going to read any more of it. It's just really clunky. Everything in this book is so clunky. I kept wondering, when is this character going to show up in the book, and he never did. So, I don't know. So, yeah, that's Transit to Scorpio. Unfortunately, none of these books are going to get read. I'm probably not going to keep these. I'm going to find another home for these. They'll find their audience. You know, there's some people who just like stuff that just jumps from scene to scene to scene to scene. People who don't care about a lot of continuity, character introductions, explanations about how the world works. If all you want is descriptions of things, there's plenty of that for you. So what am I going to rate this book on the garbage scale? Let's do a 1 to 10 rating for garbage. It's kind of pulpy. It's badly written, a ripoff of so many other books that came before it. I'm going to have to give this probably a 6 out of 10 on the trash scale. Maybe a 7. I'll give it a 7 just because of the sheer number of naked women that are just strewn about Dre Prescott as this book goes on. In every scenario, in every scene, there's just naked women everywhere, or nearly naked women. Okay, so I'll see you tomorrow with the next book. All right, so it is August 2nd, and I've read my second book for GarbAugust. And this is probably, I can't imagine reading a trashier book than Triceratops and Bottoms. This is actually only the second like legit erotica that I've ever read in my life. And so this book is about a woman named Erin in the future, like 100 years into the future. She travels around the galaxy having sex with aliens, but she's grown bored with that life. It's not enough for her anymore. So she hears tell about this new invention called a time machine, and she uses it and immediately goes back in time to the Jurassic era and has sex with a Triceratops. That wasn't enough for her, so she goes back again and again and again and has herself a plesiosaur, a pterodactyl, that was the Mile High Club, of course, a Carnotaurus or Carnotaurus? I don't even know what that one is. And a sexy Supersaurus. And then there's a bonus short story about another woman who has sex with a Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is a very short book. If you look on the inside here, you can see how meager this print is. I read the first chapter in this, which is the longest one, about the Triceratops, while the oven was preheating for my pizza. Then I baked the pizza and finished the next story. This book actually took me less than 90 minutes to read, and that includes the time it took to eat the pizza. So it's not even really a book. It's more of a novella or a very long short story. And it's just the trashiest thing I ever read. I'm not going to read any of this out loud to the camera because it's embarrassing. Like, this is definitely one of those books that I think is only sold because the cover is so, well, whatever that is. It was god-awful. So let's talk about ratings. So on a scale of 1 to 10 trashiness, this is a 10. This is the garbage scale 10 out of 10 book. 100%. This is just straight trash, straight garbage. But it wasn't unfun to read, if I'm being honest. Not appealing in any way. I'm not giving you a window into my proclivities. But it was amusing. It was amusing because I'd never read anything even remotely like this before. So just a quick check-in here. We'll talk again tomorrow, okay? Okay, it's August 4th, and I just finished reading my third book for GarbAugust. This is Razor Girl by Carl Hyacin. This is actually the second book in the Andrew Yancey series. The first one was called Bad Monkey. I didn't know that this was the second book in a series, but you can read these as standalones. This was fantastic. This was hilarious and busy. There was a lot of stuff that went down in this book. This is a crazy kind of caper book. It takes place down in the Florida Keys. And I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to talk to you about this book. So I just decided that I was going to read part of the inside flap here. And it says, when Lane Kuhlman's car is rear-ended on the road to the Florida Keys, this accident is no accident. Behind the wheel of the offending car is Mary Mansfield, the eponymous Razor Girl. But this is only the beginning of a series of events that spiral crazily out of control while unleashing some of the wildest characters Hyacin has ever set loose on the page. There's Martin Thibodeau, the owner of Sedimental Journeys, a company that steals sand from one beach to replace erosion on another. Buck Nance, a Wisconsin accordionist who rebrands himself the star of a redneck reality show called Bayou Brethren. A street psycho known as Blister, who's more Buck Nance than Buck Nance could ever be. Brock Richardson, a Miami product liability lawyer who's getting dangerously and deformingly hooked on the very product he's litigating against. And Andrew Yancey, formerly Detective Nancy, first introduced to readers in Bad Monkey. Andrew Yancey is our primary protagonist, along with Razor Girl. The two of them kind of share the spotlight here. My God, what a book this was. It was super entertaining. Just 333 pages, beginning to end, nonstop fun. There was not a boring scene in the book. So much happens in this story. At its heart, it starts off as a kidnapping caper gone awry, but that leads to, reality film stars and stalkers and a rat infestation. The mafia is involved. I can't even really summarize this book and keep this review to just a couple of minutes. I'm just going to say that this book was hilarious. I absolutely recommend it. On a garbage scale, though, I'm just judging a book by its cover. I thought this was going to qualify as garbage, and it's a little trashy, but it's self-aware trash, and it's just so much fun. It is super competently written, really funny, and it's just such a breath of fresh air after the last couple of books that I've read. Yeah, if you like your comedies a little late night, you're gonna love this book. It was just a fun romp beginning to end. Really enjoyed it. Definitely gonna have to read Bad Monkey now, and maybe a couple of Carl Hyacint's other books. So apparently he's got quite a lot of books out there. So yeah, check this one out for sure. All right, well, hey, it's August 12th already. In the last 9 days, I've read 2 more books. Life has really thrown me a couple of curveballs recently. We had some rain, and the basement drain collapsed underneath the concrete at my house, and water backed up all in my basement. My son and I got that cleaned up, but now I have to deal with a collapsed drain. And then right after that, the very next day, I had a gas leak in my house. The gas company had to come out and shut everything down. Also carbon monoxide. So I've got about $10,000 worth of repairs to do at my house, and pretty stressed out about all of that. And so I decided I was just gonna leave town for a little while, take a road trip. So I drove 500 miles to watch my favorite baseball team lose. But that's all good. I had a blast at the ballpark, spent some quality time with my folks, and I did get some reading done on the road while my dad drove. While my dad drove. Jeez, it's early in the morning yet for me, okay? I haven't had any coffee. Okay, the first book I want to talk to you about is 2 Men and 20, and this is by Maurice Proctor. This is the 9th book in the Inspector Martineau series, even though Inspector Martineau is only in this for 10% of the book. Most of this follows Kane. He is the leader of the XCC mob, and XCC is oxyacetylene, and they use oxyacetylene to cut into safes to rob them. So they're a safe cracking mob. There's 5 of them. I won't go into who all these characters are. It doesn't really matter. This book was about clunky as hell. There were 3 things that made this book difficult to read, and the first one is that it was published in 1964, and it uses a lot of British slang from that era, and I'm just not familiar with that. I had to use a lot of context clues to figure out what the hell they were talking about a lot of the time. The second thing was that it's just very clunky. It head hops. We're jumping from
one person to another, sometimes between time and space. We're hopping not just between two people in the same conversation, but between people in different places, and flash forward, flash back, sometimes within the same paragraph. It's really disorienting. It's not constant, but the author does this often enough that I would have to stop and reread a section because I thought maybe my mind had wandered and I wasn't really paying close enough attention. I was paying close enough attention, but the author wasn't. And the third thing that made this book difficult to read is that it's falling apart. Oh, I just lost some pages. This thing, it's old. It's an old book, and you know, it's 60 years old, and these mass market paperbacks weren't always made with the greatest of care. I'm going to grab that before the water soaks up. Aside from those three things, I quite liked this book. The characters were fairly rich, even if they were a little two-dimensional. I mean, they're not going through any grand sweeping changes from beginning to end, but they were very well fleshed out. They were very distinct from one another, all five of the members of the mob, so that the characters were quite good. But the best part about this book was the details of the heist itself and the investigation, and how Detective Inspector Martineau was able to close in on the mob. And then the evasion at the end was really fun. So it was super clunky prose, not expertly written at all, but it's a good story. And I would read another one of these, honestly. Now, as far as the garbage scale on this book goes, I picked it because of the cover. That's pretty sensational. I like that. But the thing is, like, this scene does not appear anywhere in the book. He does crash his car at the end, but he doesn't go through the windshield, and it's certainly not in such dramatic fashion. The windshield does crack, though. That is an exaggeration of all exaggerations. But garbage-wise, it's pretty low on the garbage scale. It's actually a fairly clean book. It was a fairly straightforward heist caper. So I mean, there's a little bit of schmaltzy sexism in the book, but nothing that would really raise your hackles. I would say that this is probably a 2 on the garbage scale, 2 out of 10 for sure. But that'll about do it for this one. I've got another book, but I forgot to bring it out here with me. So I'm gonna go home and grab that, and we'll talk about it back at the house.
Okay, so it is still August 12th. Okay, it's just an hour later since I last saw you. Back at the house. This is Don Pendleton's Executioner series, Vigilante Run. Got my notes here. This is my reading journal, my new reading journal. And I'm just going to read to you from this journal because it's probably the best way to get my thoughts across succinctly in a small amount of time. So you've got Mac Bolan, a one-time lone wolf assassin and mass murderer, now working for the Justice Department in the capacity of a soldier/executioner, kind of a 00 license to kill, and he really gets off on the killing. Bolan is a true ammosexual and lives life with the purpose none higher than pulling triggers. It is his first and last instinct. So you've got a white national biker gang called the Purists, but they don't seem committed to their cause, never extolling the tenets of white nationalism, and in fact team up and partner with the White Shirts, an all-black gang. Now, then there's this local real estate tycoon who's hired the Purists to produce and distribute methamphetamines, but when a vigilante named Rook steps in and starts indiscriminately killing the bad guys, the other vigilante, Mac Bolan, this fella, has to step in and do some killing of his own before Rook kills too many innocent people. Now, these two murderers, one a hero and one a villain, go on 5 killing rampages in the first 60 pages of the book before the plot actually starts to develop. So it turns out that this real estate tycoon is in bed with a Chinese sleeper cell who is operating under orders of the Chinese government to acquire meth from American sources to use as an ingredient in a secret new formula for nerve gas that they plan to use in a domestic terror attack. But before they can do that, the Purists and White Shirts go all in, ride or die, on their own domestic terror attack by taking hostage a bunch of newspapermen at this local newspaper. The vigilante and the executioner independently rampage again, each in their own way, through the newspaper, killing all the gang members in violent, heinous ways.
Rook then survives an 8-story fall onto the roof of an SUV, and the tycoon, now short on meth for the Chinese, calls one of his other 3 meth-making groups that he knows, and business carries on. And blah, 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 blah. Mac finally stabs Rook to death and then goes ahead and briefs the President of the United States about China's goals to upset American life with homegrown terror, which has basically already happened. So that was the Chinese motivation, to destabilize America with meth nerve gas. But what was the tycoon's motivation? He's the guy that was central to all of this. He was the one who hired the meth bikers and all that. He was trying to secure financing to build the largest shopping mall in Syracuse, New York. And sadly, he doesn't get to build his mall because Mac Boland was on the case. Now, this book was pure garbage. Now, on a garbage scale, this was a solid 9.5. So I'm not going to go all the way to 10 on this one. I'm going to withhold that last half a point because there was the one female character in this book was described very sexually, and I thought they were going to exploit her even more, but they didn't. But I've got to say, I should have said this right at the beginning, that this book, this series, this Executioner series, started in the 70s. How did I not say this? This book is the 346th book in the Executioner series. How in God's name are there this many people reading this series? This is written without the slightest hint of irony. So yeah, I gave it 9.5 on the garbage scale. This is a 1 star on the Eric scale.
All right, it is August 18th, and another week has passed, and I've only managed to read one book. That is The A-Team, number 6, Operation Desert Sun, The Untold Story by Charles Heath. Now, I don't know how many of you have actually seen The A-Team. I watched it when I was a kid. I loved it. I actually had a toy A-Team van, and if I can find a picture of it on the internet, I'll put it up here. I loved that thing, but I'm pretty sure that the adventures that I put my A-Team van through were no more sophisticated than the one that's in this book here. So a quick rundown of the A-Team. In this book, there's 4 members of the A-Team. There's their commander, a Colonel John Hannibal Smith, goes by Hannibal. There's BA, which stands for Bad Attitude, played by the formidable Mr. T. He's a master sergeant. And then there's Lieutenant, I don't remember his name, but they call him Face. He is a beautiful man, and he is sort of the front man of the organization when they go out. So they call him the Face, or Face Man. Face Man is what they call him. And the 4th member of this team is Murdoch. He is a Vietnam-era helicopter pilot, now in the VA hospital being treated for post-traumatic stress syndrome and a number of other mental health disorders that he's actually probably faking. For what reason? I don't know, because they kind of play it up for laughs in this. For a men's adventure book based on the TV show, I wasn't really ready for how slapstick comedy this book gets in places, and just how deranged and unrealistic this book gets at times. So after a couple of prologue adventures, the A-Team sets off to North Africa, to a small, oil-rich country called Kafiristan. The capital city of this desert country, Kafiristan, has a prison, and as prisoner is being held Colonel Lynch, who is from one of the prologues. And Colonel Lynch hates the A-Team, and he's been trying to put him in prison. But now he's in prison, and the A-Team are there to bust him out. They execute this ludicrous plan. They break in, rescue Colonel Lynch and his team. They get him out to safety, only to discover that they were there undercover as a part of Operation Desert Sun. Okay? And it turns out that the president for life of this Kafiristan has nuclear ambitions, and so now they've got to go back. They got to break back into the prison after they just busted everybody out to set things to rights. It's preposterous. Probably the most preposterous thing that happens in this is that BA and Murdoch crash. They crash land about 300 miles away from their target, out in the dunes of the desert somewhere. And BA constructs this vehicle out of broken airplane parts, the propeller and everything. He makes this sand sled, propeller-driven sand sled with a parachute to harness the wind. And then they just travel several hundred miles across the desert in this makeshift plane. It took him 9 hours to build this vehicle. And so here's the thing. Brandon Sanderson has all these laws of writing. I've watched a number of his writing videos. And one of his laws, I think it's the 0th law of Brandon Sanderson, is always err on the side of what's awesome. Now, that might work here and there in the fantasy genre, but and I guess it works in the men's adventure genre as long as you don't take it too seriously. And I guess I was just not expecting things to be so MacGyver-y and so outlandish all the time. It just really wasn't what I was expecting in the slightest. Now, that's not to say it wasn't a fun read. It was ridiculous, but it was a lot of fun. It was easy to read. I wouldn't say it's well written, but it was easy to read. Now, on a garbage scale, where do I put this? Not real high. I would probably put this at about a 4 or a 5. It's definitely a campy men's adventure, kind of throwaway dime store book. But it wasn't super garbage. Now, it does qualify for this month of garbage reading. But I'll put it at a 5. I'll put it kind of right in the middle of the pack, just because of the campiness alone. The dialogue is pretty hilarious, but completely unrealistic. It's fun, but it's got me wanting to watch old episodes of the A-Team again. So if anybody out there knows where I can stream the A-Team, let me know downstairs in the comments, and I'll see you with the next book. It is Sunday, August 25th, and we're getting down to the last week of GarbAugust. But today I've got this book for you. It's Death Troopers by Joe Schreiber. Okay, so this is the third Joe Schreiber novel that I've read. The other two were also Star Wars books. One was Red Harvest, which is probably the worst Star Wars book that I've ever read. It takes place a long time before any of the movies, like thousands of years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but it's when the Sith were in power. The Sith ruled the galaxy, and there's an academy. It's like a dark academia zombie book because this zombie plague infests the Sith Youth Academy. It's preposterous. I really hated the book, which is why I selected Death Troopers, which is another zombie book. Instead of Sith zombies, this is supposed to be Stormtrooper zombies. It wasn't exactly that, and I'm not sure how connected these two books were. They've got to be, but it's been so long since I read the first one that I don't really remember. So I'm having a hard time connecting the dots between Red Harvest and Death Troopers. Death Troopers takes place shortly before episode 4, and it features a couple of our favorite characters from the original trilogy, so as sort of side characters. They're not the main characters of this book. Okay, so what's it about? There's a prison ship transporting prisoners across the galaxy, and they break down, basically. While they're broken down and waiting for rescue, an Imperial ship sort of drifts into space, and they scan it for life forms, and there's only 6 life forms on board, which is preposterous because these ships have crews of tens of thousands. So the prison ship docks with the Imperial ship, and it gets infested with the same zombie plague that wiped out the Imperial ship, and it's the most of the book is like a fight to the death. I've said it before on this channel that the craft of writing is different than the art of storytelling, and that concept is really well exemplified in this book. It reads a lot like a lot of the good Star Wars novels that are out there. The writing, line by line, sentence by sentence, is pretty good, but the storytelling is not. The premise, I think, is hokey, and I can't take it seriously anyway. Crossing genres into Star Wars, I don't know. It's fine as an experiment. It's fine. It's a fine idea, I guess. I just couldn't buy into it. Because this book takes place before the original trilogy, and it does include a couple of characters that we know from the original trilogy, you have to go back to the beginning with their character arcs. And this presupposes that these characters were changed all along. Like how they ended up at the end of the Origtridge is how they kind of appear here. Which it's all backwards. This was a missed opportunity to show these existing characters sort of in the raw, and that was really disappointing. There's also a med droid in Death Troopers that I think is a terrific character. His name is Waste. He's a waste of space. He's a lot of fun, but he gets really short shrift. He really shines when he's in every scene that he's in. Unfortunately, he's not in that many scenes. So even though Death Troopers was better than Red Harvest, I still didn't like it very much, but it was okay. On a garbage level, I would say that Death Troopers is, I mean, it's zombies in space. That's pretty trashy. I would say that it's probably a 6 or a 7. All right, well, that's enough for this one. I'm not sure I'm going to get through any more books this month. I'm in the middle of a class right now that's requiring up to it's like 30 hours of coursework a week, and I'm working 40 hours full-time at my main job. So I'm pretty swamped. I'm not getting a lot of reading done, which is why I've only finished one book in the last week. So hopefully I can squeeze at least one more book in this month, but we'll see. Okay, it is August 31st, the final day of GarbAugust, and I did manage to read another book, and that is Contact Harvest by Joseph Stanton. Now, I don't have a physical copy of this book because I read the ebook on my iPad. It's a book that's been sitting there probably for 10 years, and I finally got around to reading it. The reason I read this book is because it's based on a video game, and that was one of the squares on the bingo card, to read a book based on a video game, and that video game, of course, is Halo. Joseph Stanton was involved in writing the first 3 Halo video game stories, so he's very familiar with the world. This novel came out in 2007, I believe. And it is the 5th book in the Halo series, but it is Joseph Stanton's first novel, period. And I must say, bravo, Joseph Stanton. For a first outing, this was fantastic. I would not say this was garbage at all. This was really good, straightforward military sci-fi. It was a good book. It was more nuanced than a lot of sci-fi war stories, as it wasn't just about all the cool guns and all the fight scenes. The first third of this book is dedicated to the main character, which is, he's a Marine Staff Sergeant, Avery Johnson, and his character is very well fleshed out in this book. There's plenty of backstory for him. There's a lot of internal conflict that the sum total of his life's work in the military might not be a net positive, that there may be reasons for him to second guess some of his actions in life. And that creates a really rich character. He's not just a badass, he's a thoughtful badass. And it played really well in this world where the UNSC, the major fighting force of the humans, employs a lot of questionable ethics. And so this book is just really in line with that. Very thoughtful, but then the war story is really cool too. And there's a bunch of scenes. I would say probably a quarter of the book is dedicated to following the Covenant, the alien species in this universe. And that story itself was also filled with doubts and regrets and ambition and subterfuge. And all told, it was a very well-rounded book. And on a garbage scale of 1 to 10, I mean, it is aliens in space, fighting aliens in space. That doesn't necessarily make it garbage, but it can be a little campy here and there. I'll give it a 2. Yeah, I would recommend this to anybody who likes military sci-fi or Halo. I have read a few other Halo novels, and those have been pretty good too. Troy Denning writes a good Halo novel, and Karen Travis also writes good Halo work. So Joseph Stanton, very good, very pleased, not even garbage. So now I will say that this is not going to be the last book on the list. I managed to get about halfway through yet another book, and it is 1:30 on the 31st. I'm definitely going to finish the last 100 pages of this other book, and this one definitely is garbage. So stick around for the last book on the list. The last book that I have for you for GarbAugust is Slaves of the Volcano God. This is by Craigshaw Gardner. It is the first book in a series of sort of self-aware comedy spoofs on a lot of genre movies, like westerns and jungle movies and like war movies. This is the second book. No, that's the third book in the series. And this is the second one. I will not be reading these books, 2 and 3. I could barely make it through this one. It's like 5 o'clock. It took me 4.5 hours from the last time you saw me to read the last 100 pages of this. It's because I kept putting it down and wandering around my house, like opting to do the dishes and to sweep the living room, and I couldn't stay focused on this book. It is supremely corny, and it's not unfunny. There's a funny joke in this book. He just uses it 5 times a page for 212 pages. It's just the same joke over and over. Real one-note comedy for sure. But basically what's happening is Roger and this guy here, Big Louie. I'm not sure Roger's even on this cover, but that's Big Louie there. He's sort of the sidekick. So Roger is in love with Dolores, and Dolores gets captured by Dr. Doom, and Dr. Doom steals Dolores away into the Cineverse, which is like the multiverse of B-movies. And so every world is like a different B-movie set, whether it's a Western or a jungle adventure or the South Seas or monster movies or war movies or whatever, right? So each one of these worlds operates on movie logic, so you don't ever have, like, the good guys don't have to reload their guns. You play a song and 3 minutes later you're at your destination because montage magic. So it's sort of amusing, but the problem is I didn't care about what was happening because the stakes are so like jaunty and low, and everything is played for laughs. And since I know that this is a whole series, I don't think anybody's in any actual peril or anything. So you don't. This is a hard one to describe. It is so corny, not unfunny, but it is so corny that I just didn't care about any of it. And I didn't care about any of these characters. I rolled my eyes more than I laughed, that's for sure. And it's just corny and campy. I don't really have any other words for it. I don't know. Garbage scale, probably a good 7, I would say. It's just not, it stopped being fun. The gimmick stopped being fun. I ran a writer's group for a lot of years that I've talked about on this channel before. And one of the guys that came to a writer's group wrote a lot like this, where it's trying to be Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett. It's the generic Terry Brooks, the low-rent Douglas Adams. They're just not that funny beyond their one joke. The thing that Terry Pratchett and even Douglas Adams has going for it is at least the story is fun too. You don't just have a premise and one joke that you beat to death over and over again. That's what really makes this garbage rather than a real good sci-fi comedy. All right, so that's it for all of these books.